Okay, good afternoon everybody and welcome to the first of our webinars for Apprenticeship Week. This is a joint webinar with East Coast College Apprenticeships team, Vattenfall, Scottish Power and EEEGR. So we'd like you to welcome to the event. Please be aware that the event is recording as well so we can share with other students and schools post the event. So just a couple of slides about what is an apprenticeship. Apprenticeships gives you the chance to earn while you learn and combine the practical training in a job with learning at college. As an apprentice, you will be employed and work alongside experienced staff in the sector, gain job-specific skills, earn a wage, which also entitles you to holiday pay, and get time off towards training towards your apprenticeship, the equivalent of around 1 day a week if full-time or on block release. The length of your apprenticeship will depend on the level you are studying. You may start at level 2 or level 3 and can work your way through to the degree apprenticeship in engineering at level 6. So at East Coast College, we work with over 600 employers across Norfolk and Suffolk and have around 700 active apprentices at any point in the year. Our apprenticeship trainers are all experts in the field and the facilities on our college campuses are second to none, especially within the energy sector, where we were lucky enough a year ago to open our £11 million building at Lowestoft in terms of energy and engineering. So apprenticeships, we've got a wide range of choices, which include engineering, offshore wind, but can also include construction trades, groundworks, construction, service industries and motor vehicle. So how do you actually become an apprentice? You can still apply for an apprenticeship while you're at school. To start one, you will need to be 16 years and over, living in England and not in full-time education. To find an employer, you as an individual can register with the National Apprenticeship Service by visiting the website below. This hosts all the current apprenticeship vacancies, as long as the ones that are also on offer by East Coast College. The other option is also to send your CVs out to employers in the industry and with a covering letter explaining what you are looking for in terms of apprenticeship opportunities. Work experience is also a great way to understand the sector more and also explore with the employer about what strengths you have got to offer. If you're successful and manage to secure an apprenticeship, also make sure the college are aware so we can help you with your next steps. So what we'll have now is some engaging conversations and exploration about the wind sector. So we've got Susan from Vattenfall, Ailey from Scottish Power, and Gemma from EEEGR that heads up energy and engineering in the region. They will be having some discussions. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask, please put those in the chat box and we will work through your questions at an appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We thought it would be nice that you saw us all and we had this informal start, because we really did want to encourage you to write sort of some questions to introduce yourself in the chat and say hello. And of course, to know what you love to do and then know where the opportunities are two parts of the jigsaw puzzle. So by starting maybe with our stories, we hoped one of them at least would inspire you.
Thanks, Sue. I think perhaps if we, I know Rachel just mentioned our job titles, but perhaps if we just start with just our full names, our titles and the companies that we're joining from, and perhaps just a couple of sentences in terms of what we do, and we can get started from there. I know we'll pick up on that in a bit more detail a bit later on, but perhaps if I go first. So I'm Gemma Head, I'm Skills for Energy Programme Manager and Company Secretary at the East of England Energy Group, or EEEGR.
Hi there, I'm Sue Falk-Clovesy. I'm Local Liaison Officer and Skills Champion for Vattenfall, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ailey Campbell and I am a Supply Chain Strategy Analyst for Scottish Power Renewables.
Brilliant. So everyone knows who we are now, so that's a good start. So to begin with then, Sue, can you tell me a little bit about your career path? So we've just heard the role that you're doing now, but can you tell us about how you got there and what you're doing now?
Okay, it's a bit of a story because I'm slightly older than both of you probably, but when I grew up, I loved the outdoors and the environment, and also I dreamt about traveling quite a bit. My father was a bit like, you know, you want to travel, go and earn your own money. So I always had to earn money, lots of waitressing, lots of those jobs, and I really enjoyed those as well. I went to do my A-levels, and at that time there weren't very many choices. You know, it was A-levels or not A-levels. And I chose to do chemistry, biology, and geography. That brought together my love for the environment and travel, really. And when it came to university, I was the first in my family ever to go to university. And I thought I'd go as far away as possible and somewhere very beautiful. So I went to Stirling in Scotland and I did environmental science. And because I liked the business side, I didn't know whether to do environmental science or business. And I've always been on the interface of things, do you know what I mean? Not in one world and not in the other world. And I found that there was a course at Stirling that was both business and environmental science. And I've used those two for the rest of my career, nearly every single day. It's very interesting. And while at Stirling, I had an opportunity to be at Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. I had a scholarship year there and went to a university of 22,000 and did range management, literally went to lectures with cowboys, and it was quite fun. So I really continued enjoying my environmental work there. Following university, you know, you can absolutely do anything you want. It's not about money. You know, I made bracelets, painted t-shirts, waitressed, anything I could just to keep enjoying and finding out what I love doing. Because actually, if you can do that, the rest of your career will just be straightforward. You go from one thing to the next and it will not go perfectly, but you'll go in the direction that you love. So I went out to Africa, joined an expedition to Africa, and that changed my life, seeing the different ways people lived and worked. And I was in Zambia. It was a Royal Geographical Society expedition of the year, and we looked at aerial photography, ground truthing. And it's at that point that I really did focus in on the environment and wanted to appreciate the development side as well. I came back, couldn't get a job. It was difficult just at that time. And so did voluntary work for Warwickshire Nature Conservation Trust. They're a wildlife charity. Again, I used that experience in my life too. And that was interesting because that was my first foray with teaching and developing school ground proposals. And that's at the point I really realised I wanted teaching in my life maybe as well, and working with young people. I was quite young myself then, and got my first job with the National Trust in Wales, where I was an outdoor pursuits instructor, taking my love for the outdoors and kayaking with the environmental work. And at that point realised, yeah, I had to do more qualifications. I would be very stuck where we were if we couldn't do that. So I did my postgraduate certificate of education in secondary science teaching at the same time as having a one-year-old and being in the centre. And at that stage I was running the centre. I was 24 and running an environmental centre and really enjoying that, bringing the business side to it too. Now, business and environment, they go hand in hand, you know, and I see that now, and it was important then. After the National Trust in Wales, I was asked to set up a centre in Norfolk, and that's where we moved to Norfolk, called Brancaster Millennium Activity Centre. Again, bringing business principles with environmental principles. And I suppose, just to cut a long story short, you can see how that love for the environment, the interest in business, the fact that I love teaching and learning have all come together. And then I worked for Norfolk County Council for about 10 years, where I was head of a service, setting up a new service called the Environmental and Outdoor Learning Service, with a lot more skills development, teaching teachers, you know, in our specialist area, and setting up forest school across the county, and working with wonderful colleagues at Halton Wells Field Study Centre. But I always wanted to work for big business. And so seeing that the biggest impact I could make personally was going to be probably in the wind industry, and trying to make sure that young people in Norfolk and Suffolk and the east of England got these opportunities, I stumbled over the Vattenfall job through LinkedIn, nothing more, LinkedIn, and then applied. You don't get a job without applying. And now I'm in a position where I'm hopefully going to take an apprenticeship. But I'm just on the cusp of trying to persuade people that I need this extra qualification, which I think I do. So hopefully, there we are. That was my story.
Brilliant, thanks, Sue. It's yeah, it sounds like you've done a huge amount and right across the world as well, which I maybe didn't appreciate before as to how far afield that had taken you. So I think perhaps Ailey, it's your turn.
Great. So my story is not anywhere near as exciting as Sue's. I've not met any cowboys yet on my career path so far. But my career started probably about 12 years ago, when I left school, wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, tried to do a couple of courses, nothing was taking my interest. And I think that's something really important when you're choosing your next steps. It's to pick something that not just interests you, but excites you and encourages you, and that you actually have like an enthusiasm for. So I tried, God, what did I try? I tried business and events. I tried information technology. I think at one point I even tried psychology. And I think the longest I lasted was about 6 months. They just were not for me. And I thought the next step in my career would be work. So find somewhere to work. But unfortunately, when you're applying for jobs, if you don't have any practical experience, it's difficult to get those roles. So I started applying for work experience. And on the 6th of April 2008, I came to Scottish Power for 2 weeks, unpaid work experience. And I absolutely loved it. I loved working in the office. I loved working with the people there. The most exciting thing for me about working at Scottish Power back then was I worked in the networks business. And I was able, there wasn't a single road in Scotland that you could drive down at that point without seeing a wood pole or a substation or a pylon. And you got to look at those things and think, my role directly contributes to that asset and existence. So I worked in technical administration, then moved on to project management. And then after about 6 years in that, I moved on to procurement, which is quite interesting. And during my time in procurement, I got to be part of a project called the Involve project, which is run by the parent company Iberdrola. And that involved going to Mexico City and Sao Paulo in Brazil. And we went over, so I went 4 times. We went over for a month and we got to do introduction for education. So it was working with students that were in favelas at the time and teaching them basic IT. So a lot of these students at that time didn't have access to basic things like a calculator. If you can imagine someone that's never used a calculator, when you're trying to explain Excel to them, it was really challenging. It was in a different language, so it was either in Spanish or Portuguese, and you're working with these students and you were seeing that growth and that excitement and learning new skills and developing new skills. And every time I came home from these projects, so I went for 4 years in a row, every time I came home, I missed it. I missed working with people, I missed helping people out. And then this role came up in offshore renewables, which sees me work in the supply chain team, but I manage the skill strategy. So I got to bring part of that volunteering experience and bring it into my everyday role, which was about making education, training, learning completely accessible for people in the UK. And I think that's something that's certainly the highlight of my career, getting to do these kind of opportunities, because it takes something that I had as a personal interest and developed it into my sort of day-to-day role. So definitely the thing I love most.
Wow.
So I think, Gemma, this is your turn now. The spotlight's on you. Tell us about your career.
My turn. So you've both been further afield than I have, that's for sure. So I feel like I've missed out on an element of my career journey here, because you've both been across the world. So I'm pretty jealous of that. So well, I suppose my journey into offshore wind or into the energy sector in the broader sense is not perhaps as I don't know, I was never 100% sure in terms of what I wanted to do when I left school, and kind of what my journey was going to be. So I went through GCSEs and A levels. I went to an all-girls school, so that was quite an experience in itself, and we were very much geared towards kind of solicitors roles or doctors, or the really kind of high-flying roles, which didn't really interest me. So I kind of kept going with my education. So I did my A levels and went on to university, and I'd done some work experience when I was in year 10 at school, which was in a nursery setting. So I thought, well, I quite enjoyed that. So I went off to university and did my degree in early years education. And I kind of had a thought in my mind about teaching. So that was kind of where I thought that I would be going. But I thought, actually, well, when I was 18, I guess, or thereabouts, I thought that I didn't have the confidence to go into teaching. So I thought the thought of kind of getting up in front of students and in front of parents in particular, that was a pretty scary thought, and that frightened me off from going down the teaching route. So I decided that wasn't for me. Completed my degree, and thought, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do with this now. So my parents at the time were due to move out of the area. So I'm from Essex originally, and they were moving over to Yarmouth, so across to Norfolk. So I thought it was a good time for a fresh start. Let's I didn't know what I was going to do with my degree, but at least it was all done and dusted, and I knew that was complete. So I decided to move with them and have a bit of a fresh start. So what would I have been then? 19, I guess, or thereabouts. So I left everything that I knew in Essex and moved to Yarmouth, and moved in with my parents and moved out shortly after. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I kind of arrived in Yarmouth, had a look around, couldn't really work out as to what direction I was going into. So I enrolled with a few agencies, trying to just get any job at that point, any job that was going to get me out of the house. So I had about 9 weeks climbing the walls where I was not working and not studying, and this was a completely alien experience for me. So enrolled with an agency, and got an interview for an administrator role at a company called NWES. Got that job, which was really great, and I went off and did some admin work for them. At the same time, I was working for Pontins, so I had some experience. I wasn't a blue coat. I aspired to be a blue coat at the time, but just to earn a bit of extra money, I went off and spent some time with Captain Croc and the team over at Pontins in Hemsby. Still kind of not really sure as to where I was going to go with it, but the role that I had secured was on reception in a building called the Beacon Innovation Centre in Yarmouth. And so there were a number of kind of startup companies and companies that were really in their initial stages. And one of those companies was a company called 3Sun. So at the time, it was about 4 employees. So I got to know them, got to know everybody else in the building, and managed to get an interview with them and secured a role as an admin assistant with 3Sun. I spent 6 years working for them, and went through roles at HR and logistics and training and lots of different roles, kind of working with 3Sun. And they were just about spreading their wings into renewables at the time when I joined them, and that had developed much further by the time that I left. And then I found this role that I'm now in, so Skills for Energy Programme Manager. and it was an opportunity to use what I'd learned in my degree, so working with students and individuals that are at their kind of first stages, right through to supporting adults into finding out about the industry and doing different things. So I kind of fell into this role, I suppose, and fell into working in the energy sector. I never thought it's where I would end up, but here I am. So that's me. So I will ask you both a question then. What do you both think is the most important thing when choosing a qualification or direction?
Shall I go first?
You can go first, Sue.
Okay, I think you need to do something that you love and believe in and care to do, because I think that's the most important thing. And I think the other thing is to understand what is there, and that's the labour market intelligence.
Excellent.
Yes.
Amy, your turn.
Of course. So I done my qualification slightly back to front. So I was working in the energy sector, really enjoyed it, looked at what my career progression would look like, and then picked a qualification that would suit that. So I got a little bit of experience first, and then I went on and studied at night school for probably about 4 or 5 years all in, doing an HND in electronic and electrical engineering. And that gave me the tools to kind of go forward. That was a decision to study that would benefit my career, something that I was interested in. And I'm quite a visual person, so I like to see things. I use a lot of diagrams and a lot of tables, and I felt like the engineering studies really brought that all in, and it was very interesting. And just that whole element of how do things work, and being able to look at that and assess that and work it out for yourself, it was really good.
And Gemma, in a way, you're doing some learning now on an apprenticeship, because the people joining us today, they're interested in apprenticeships, and we're going to go on now a little bit and tell them, aren't we, about our companies and apprenticeships. But you're doing an apprenticeship at the moment. Can you give us an insight into that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm doing the Associate Project Manager Level 4, so the APM. I am about 3 months, I think, into the program. So obviously, given the current circumstances, it's all via remote learning. So I'm having to log in and take lots of information in, and take. I'm just looking at my notebooks, which are filling up with notes and information that I'm going to need further down the line. So so I'm making copious amounts of notes at the moment in preparation for an exam and some bits and pieces that will come along later in the year.
How did you choose that the project management apprenticeship?
So I had a look right the way through. So I knew that I wanted to be studying again. So I've done some qualifications. You know, when I was at 3SUN, for example, I went through my certificate in personnel practice, which is a CIPD qualification. So that was a year with day release at college. But I haven't really studied in depth since then. I've done a few kind of day or 2 day courses, but nothing substantial. So I knew that I wanted to be studying again. I knew that I wanted to go back down that route, and I had a look through. So we worked together, Sue, didn't we? And had a look at some of the sort of available courses that were out there. And given that I manage quite a large project just now in the energy sector, we thought that the project management side would really help me in terms of my future and developing the program and being able to support the industry more widely going forward. So it's the content. I'd encourage anybody to go and have a look at it, because the content is really broad. In that you know, we're talking now about renewables in particular, but in a sense that's relatively narrow. That's, you know, that's one element of such a big picture. And you know, skills like project management are skills that you could apply right across any industry, really.
Now, seeing the questions, some of the questions we're getting now are stimulators probably to go on to the presentations. They're keen to understand about Scottish Power and the apprenticeships opportunities there, and also about the qualities we're looking at as employers in our apprenticeships. So it's probably time for us to get on to the presentations.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy. So I think, do we want to go on to the next slide, please? So Scottish Power, who are we? Scottish Power is the name for the group of companies that are established within the UK. Our European presence, we are part of the Iberdrola group. In the UK, we are split into 3 separate organisations. So we have the networks business that look after the transmission and distribution of electricity in Central Belt Scotland and round about the Wirral in the Liverpool region. We have the retail business, so that is the people that send you bills, that's the people you talk to around your domestic association for electricity, and we also have the renewables business. So as a group, we have around sort of 5,500 people working throughout the UK on various elements of these projects. The group also has a large sort of corporate presence where we have central services such as administration, finance, HR, education and cyber security. That's another corporate entity that we've got. So if you want to jump onto the next slide. So in East Anglia, we're probably best known, I would say, at the moment for the East Anglia 1 project, which was commissioned last summer. So that is a 714 megawatt offshore wind farm that's operated out of the operations and maintenance base in Lowestoft. In addition to that, you'll probably hear a lot in the media and online, and hopefully through the college, around the East Anglia Hub project. The East Anglia Hub is the collective term that we are using to deliver the East Anglia 3, 2 and 1 North project. So East Anglia 3 is consented and East Anglia 1 North and 2 are going through the consenting process. And the consenting process is essentially the process that you go through to get permission to construct and operate the asset. So you have to apply for planning permission and then you have to go through the process to complete that process, and then you can get to construction. So we'll be doing the East Anglia Hub project. So if you could go on to the next slide. So East Anglia Hub is 3.1 gigawatts of offshore energy, which is the equivalent of up to 2.7 million homes. We're applying for permission to construct up to 263 turbines as a maximum. And the water depth ranges between sort of 24 to 76 metres. So quite a big project to scale, and also in comparison to East Anglia 1, which was 714 megawatts and 102 turbines. So on to the next slide, please. So the timeline for East Anglia Hub, at the moment we're going through the procurement and design optimisation. Hopefully, once the consent process is concluded, we'll be able to start construction next year with a view to completing construction in 2026. And following on from that, you have the operations and maintenance phase for the project, which is between sort of 25 to 30 years. And that's when we'll be using a lot of technicians in the offshore operations stage. So on to the next slide, please. So like I said earlier, part of my role is managing the skills strategy for offshore wind. So the offshore wind industry has a document called the sector deal, which talks around how you will, how the industry will grow. So it talks about competition, innovation and skills. So we work in the framework that the sector deal kind of sets up. We work with education universities to promote apprenticeships, transition, social mobility and diversity. So obviously the key one today is apprenticeships, and we were really pleased last year to create our first ever offshore wind apprenticeship programme. and we hired 2 candidates for that, and they're just sort of getting into the middle of their first year in the apprenticeship. And also we will be announcing the recruitment of this year's intake shortly. So just on to the next slide. So you'll see there the website address. There's an area on the website specifically for offshore wind opportunities. And if you've got any questions around the types of roles, the types of training that you would need, what the minimum requirements to apply for the roles would be, just feel free to drop an email to the email address that's on screen, and a member of the team will get back to you with your query. Thanks. So I think that's on to Sue's slide next.
Lovely. So we're in a slightly different situation. Ailey, as you can see, you've got active projects and you've got some recruiting of apprenticeships already. Ours is in the consenting process for all of the project. So I'll tell you a little bit about the projects. It's vitally important that you understand the project, because everything we talk about, there's a job behind. Okay, so it's not like, which apprenticeships we have. It doesn't quite work like that. Actually, there is the potential to do apprenticeships behind many of the jobs, but you need to just work it out a little bit. So next slide. It's important also to understand the company, because you're going to have to really like working for the company that you work for. For Vattenfall, our ethos is all about fossil fuel free living within 1 generation. That's what we're about. It's a little broader than just wind. There are a few other strings to the bow as well. If we go to the next slide. I want to focus a bit on wind though, because that's where the opportunity is on your doorstep. The Norfolk Vanguard and Boreas projects are between 45 kilometres and 75 kilometres off the coast of Norfolk. And these projects will provide 3.6 gigawatt of electricity. That's 10% of the domestic supply into UK homes. And we also have a major construction project which would bring the electricity to the grid at Necton. So everything behind this, everything behind the onshore and offshore construction will relate to jobs with us or in the supply chain. And the supply chain, of course, don't know who there are yet, but the supply chain will also be wanting to sign up to apprenticeships as well. So this is why you need to get your head behind the projects. And it's not quite as simple as saying, here's the list of apprenticeships we've got. Actually, many of the apprenticeships will be in the supply chain. Next slide. Just a tiny bit about Vattenfall. We are a Swedish company, okay, but obviously this is one of our major investments in the UK. There's already been quite a bit of investment. If the projects come off, and we've got consent for Norfolk Vanguard, we haven't yet got consent for Boreas, together there'll be a process for contracts of difference, and then there'll be a design and build program. And you can see the timetable here. It's actually very similar to the timeline that Ailey showed. Next slide. I know I'm whistle stopping through all of this, but it just so you get some background. Just as Scottish Power Renewable has, Vattenfall has its skills and talent framework and a skills strategy, which we're developing now. Because we don't have operating wind farms in, off the Norfolk coast, we don't have apprenticeships just now at this minute. However, we're on the cusp of having those opportunities. And you can see here that we expect and like to work with schools and colleges all the way down from the informal work we do to year in industry, which we do have at the moment, year in industry students linked to UEA, to apprenticeships. And then beyond that, transition into the business and continuous professional development. Let's go on. Next slide. So I want to give you a little bit of insight into the sort of jobs we have. And these are the jobs that Vattenfall would have. You can see it's not all about offshore wind turbine technicians. It's much, much broader than that. And I definitely sort of think a little bit more broadly about your careers, matched with what you enjoy doing, and that the offshore wind sector, multi-billion-pound projects here are the onshore elements as well as the offshore elements. Just as you can see that Gemma's doing a project management qualification now, just in time for when those excellent opportunities, either with the developers or with the supply chain, are going to need extra project management. She's looked at the intelligence, the labour market intelligence, and is positioning, obviously, herself for work in her own business and to show what she can do for other businesses. So anyway, I won't go through these, but if you want to link to our careers website, then it's there. And that's another thing. Actually, all of the jobs will always be on either LinkedIn or the Vattenfall careers website. And just like with other companies, if the jobs aren't there, they aren't the jobs. So we will advertise them. Next slide. But Vattenfall and the developers' jobs are just the tip of the iceberg. They really are. When you look at the supply chain, you've got 80% of the jobs will be around the areas mentioned here, and there will be with our tier 1 and tier 2 contractors. And Gemma will talk a little bit more about that, so I won't go into great detail. Again, if you're interested to see the sort of jobs available, then you can link onto the YouTube channel. What I do want you to think about is the jobs for the future might be slightly different to what you see them now. For example, there'll be a lot more IT related. So if you're keen on one area, make sure you have the IT understanding as well. There'll be opportunities for looking at analytics and data, big data, robotics, process automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things. All these things are easy to trip off the tongue, but actually, you know, look at your area of interest and also look at what the digital side of that might be, because it's very likely that you'll need a combination of those two. You can also see here that in construction, that's where the peak of the jobs are, and that's why the supply chain is so important to you. Next one. A focus now on apprenticeships. We've heard a little bit about apprenticeships, and you can go on to the government apprenticeship website to find out a little bit more about this. And of course, you've got East Coast College at your fingertips as well. There are funding rules, and you will have mentors, and there are different ways to do this. For Vattenfall at the moment, there are a number of ways. We're looking at, firstly, we're upskilling some of our own people before we have projects in the locality. So that might be anything from the MBAs and some digital qualifications. Then as the opportunities arrive on the doorstep, we'll be looking at cohorts of apprenticeships and what those might be and how we're going to be able to deliver those. And not only ourselves, but the supply chain will be looking at those as well. So we'll be looking to possibly transfer some apprenticeship funding to our supply chain, because that would be how it would work. And then we'll be looking at any gap areas and how we can maybe transition colleagues into the industry through using apprenticeships and these other tools at our disposal to make sure they're skilled up and building on the experiences they already have. Next slide. And again, I won't go into this in detail, but if you want to search the apprenticeship standards, then they're there for you to look at. And they're quite broad, and you can also work out exactly what East Coast College is doing. Of course, you've got East Coast College on your doorstep. Next slide. I could give a few case studies, but this is, you can do an apprenticeship at every age, can't you? You can go in there and do work experience and work out what apprenticeship you want to do later. You don't have to have it all worked out in advance, and that's exactly what this mini case study suggests. Jonathan actually leads our O&M onshore operations and maintenance, and he's now doing an apprenticeship. Next slide. Finally, again, as Ailey had suggested, the focus on diversity and inclusion is really important for our industry just now. We talked about the offshore wind sector deal. We have got targets there. At least a third of our workforce needs to be female. We're looking at ethnicity. We're looking at differently able. There are definitely the roles there for every sort of person. But the growth is about to happen. I mean, it started slowly and is about to happen. So getting behind the projects and what might be an offer where is again the most important thing. Next slide. I won't go through this, but there's some great websites out there for you to get behind the different roles. And the Catapult is one of them. And the next slide. And of course, I would, if I was looking just now, be getting behind LinkedIn, looking at the type of, you're looking at the people and the type of jobs they're doing, following people, understanding their connections, and I suppose really doing that homework. Because if you do come for an interview with Vattenfall, Scottish Power, Renewable, or anybody else, we will expect you to really understand the business and understand our business. And you can best do that by looking at the jobs and opportunities that are available and what we're involved with. And finally, yeah, that's just my contact details. So, Gemma, we were now going to go on to looking at some labour market intelligence. We've got some questions that are appearing as well. And I think if we do this quite quickly, because we could ignore labour market intelligence, but actually it's the most critical thing, knowing where the job roles are. So shall we take our audience through this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go, Sue.
Do you want me to go? Okay, so we're going to do this quite quickly, aren't we, Gemma? So we want people in the audience to have a look at the question and just think what the answer is, and then we're going to pop it up on the screen. Over to you, Gemma.
No problem. So just have a think about, so that first question there, the UK has the tightest labour market in how many years? So 5, 10, 25 or 40. So just have a think. I think, Ailey, I don't think you've seen the answers, so you can be thinking as well.
And I think we probably go through this quite quickly, but hopefully you've got an answer in your mind, and the answer is 40 years. I mean, it's really, really a tough labour market, which is great for you lot, because if you get the right qualifications and experience, or you're proactive, then there are going to be jobs there driven by the green economy.
So the shortfall of engineering graduates every year, is it 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 or 30,000? So have a quick think. And then Amy, if you can put the answer up, please.
20,000. So that's crazy. You know, there are definitely roles for you, not just in the east of England, but across the whole of the UK and across Europe and across the world. So it is a place to stick in there and get your experiences.
And the next question is the percentage of professional engineers that were women. So I'm not sure as to the time frame of that one, Sue, but is it 12%, 18%, 24% or 33%?
It's only 12% at the moment. And you can see where the reference is there, and that's not good enough. It's not good enough for our industry, and there's an expectation that we'll improve on that. We can't need so many engineers and for so few to be in those diverse other categories, and that's including women.
Percentage of the energy and utilities workforce that will retire within 10 years. So is it 10%, 15%, 20% or 25%?
This is scary. It's 20%. So, you know, we will need 220,000 new recruits in the future. And these were just some fast facts. We'll just pop those up now. They're not question and answers, but is quite worrying. This is why we're interested in working with young people as well in primary school, because we need to change these sorts of statistics. Only 1 in 50 will achieve an engineering degree. It doesn't have to be a degree, you don't have to get it all at once, but you can see where the gap is. And the annual shortfall of our level 3 skill set in engineering, which are the very skill sets that you're developing at East Coast College, is 69,000 people. Okay, 69,000, yeah. So it's it's a perfect storm. And if you want to know any more of these engineering facts and figures and data, you can find it from these sources. Next slide. And especially, I would suggest look at the National Grid, has an excellent paper here called Building the Net Zero Energy Workforce. And that will also give you insight, and it will broaden your horizons a little bit before you narrow them down and decide what you're going to do. Good. And we won't worry about these, but if you're interested in any more of the labour market intelligence, we can give you those links. We can probably give you this little slide pack and the next one. And it'll give you a summary of the key issues and signpost you to the right documentation. And finally, there's something about robots and wind, because innovation is so key in our sector. And this is a super little podcast from the BBC Sound Production. And we thought you might like that as well.
Okay, thank you, ladies. That has been a real eye-opener, I'm sure, for many people on the webinar. We've got a range of questions that have come in. So if you're okay, we'll just work through a few of those. So first one is, we've got apprenticeships being talked about in the region with various companies. When do we think there'll be those opportunities for people to apply? Ailey?
Yeah, I can take that one. So as I said earlier, last year we created our first ever apprenticeship programme, and the reason we had to wait till last year is because we had a live operational asset, because obviously a key part of the apprenticeship programme is the theory-based learning, but also the practical learning. So hopefully this year, I've got my fingers crossed, the application window will be opening around the 8th of March. And that'll be open for about 3 weeks for people to submit CVs. Following on from that, there will be, it's quite a usual practice, but you do like an online testing for your maths and English skills. And then following on from that, we have an assessment day where you will have to take part in like a climbing test, and then an event in the offshore pool, the survival tank. And then following on from that, there will be face-to-face interviews, and hopefully the successful candidates will be starting at the college around about the August-September time.
Lovely, thanks. Susan, did you want to add anything about your timescales for your...
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Ailey's developed just the most fantastic apprenticeship opportunity, and we're so pleased to see that some of the young people we've worked with are finding their way into that. And we want to also make sure we have apprenticeships on the ground in the east of England. The timescale will depend on when we have things actually happening on the ground. So it'll be after CFD, it'll be, you know, probably 23, 24. So a little bit behind Scottish Power Renewable.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, another question is, what sort of qualifications do I need that would put me in a good position to apply for apprenticeship if I'm a school leaver?
Gemma, do you want to take that one?
I'm happy to go first. So it's a really good question, and I think it links back nicely to what's been said throughout the presentation, I think, and talking about our own career paths and things, that it depends ultimately what direction you want to go into. And you know, an engineering apprenticeship is very different to a business administration apprenticeship, and lots of others kind of in so many different subjects, which the college can certainly give you more details about. So ultimately it's going to be about thinking about what direction it is you want to go into, and then researching as to what qualifications you're going to need to move into whatever that apprenticeship is. So and just touching on what Ailey said earlier on as well about maths and English being a testing area for apprenticeships and for that entry criteria, I had to go through that assessment process as part of enrolling onto my apprenticeship. So even though I'm not gone into engineering or anything of that nature, those are two particularly key areas when it comes to looking at an apprenticeship. And I had to dig out some of my memories as to GCSE maths and English, which feels like an awful long time ago, just to get me through those initial assessments.
Lovely. I mean, just to go on from that, Gemma, obviously the college does have a lot of college courses for school leavers. We've got level 2 and level 3 engineering. We've also got the construction trades, and now going into civil engineering. So For any people watching this webinar in terms of your school leavers, either this year or next year, please get in touch in one of the open events, and then our tutors can advise you on the best courses possible.
That's right. I was going to say, add to that is the attitude as well, because of course, when you've got some of these foundation skills, when you go for interview, we'll be just as interested in attitude. For Vattenfall, for example, we're looking for really active people who want to achieve a purpose, open to working with partners and other people, positive to develop solutions, very solution orientated. And so you'll have that very sort of proactive can-do attitude. You'll have analytical skills. You'll be probably fairly good at report writing maybe, but actually you will be you'll be proactive and positive. Yes.
Lovely,
Yeah,
thank you, ladies.
Absolutely. And just to pick up on that point, I think when you're looking at roles and you're trying to figure out what your path is, when you look at a job description, you'll 9 times out of 10 see the expression skills and requirements. So the requirements bit relates to your sort of professional training. So what qualifications you have from school, what you've done at college or university. But then separate to that, you have your skills, and that is your, like Sue said, that's your attitude, your problem solving skills. Are you calm? Are you confident? Do you help people out? Are you helpful? Are you good at assessing situations? And they don't need to be based on industry experience. If you have a part-time job that you can develop those skills, and it's not, doesn't matter what the industry those skills have been developed in, they're natural skills that you can grow as your experience and your career progresses. So I think that's just a really important point to put across, that customer service skills, so important when you're looking at any industry.
That's fed in really nice, because we just had a question in about most of apprenticeships I see require some form of relevant experience, but for someone who hasn't had that access to the sector, any ideas or any tips? So I think where you're talking about transferable skills, that's really important to make sure any applications for jobs or apprenticeships really sell yourself in terms of the wider aspect of employment, education, things you've done on a personal level, because as Ailey rightly says, it's those transferable skills that will make you stand out and be more prepared for that opportunity. Another question.
And I think just to add to that, it's sorry, no, I was just going to say to use your personal time wisely. If you have a 6-week summer break and you don't have anything to be doing, reach out to employers and ask about work experience, or ask to learn more about their business, or look for the internship opportunities that come up, because they are out there, and the proactiveness of that approach will do someone really, really well. It'll do a good turn for them. So
I think that's such a good example, Ellie. I'm just thinking about, the young people involved in a 3D virtual reality program, which we suddenly had to stop doing face to face, and they made it into a sort of a virtual one. And the fact that all of those young people were so proactive, and you can get experiences. It's don't be put back. Just keep in there, basically. Keep asking.
Yeah. We've had another question come in. Is there a recommended age, or is there a cap on age where people will take on an apprentice? So I think we'd all probably agree that depends on the actual apprenticeship type, whether it's administration or science background. There are some limits in terms of the age to go offshore, isn't there? But that's not to say that that's a barrier in terms of an apprenticeship, because it can look at delivery models of when you're at college and when you actually go offshore. So any other comments regarding ages?
Only to say that I'm not going to share my actual age, but I'm definitely not 16. So yeah, I'm a little bit older than perhaps the perceived average age of an apprentice. So yeah, it definitely doesn't have a cap.
Yeah, and I think it's getting away from that perception that apprenticeships is just for school leavers.
Yeah,
it can be for absolutely anybody, and it's about a training program, isn't it?
Absolutely.
They're no longer the sort of the entry level role into industry. They're all about increasing someone's experience and learning, and I think that's really important. And it's so good to see Gemma doing her apprenticeship. She's making me think about perhaps doing one myself.
We'll sign you up next week, Ailey. Okay, another valuable question. So for each one of the panel members, what is the one top quality you would look for in an apprenticeship application in terms of personal skills? One personal quality. So Susan.
Oh, I'm thinking.
On the spot.
On the spot. I think the sort of the self-belief that and excitement you'd have for working with that company, that needs to come out in some way.
Lovely, thank you. Gemma?
Sue's just nabbed my one because it was going to be the enthusiasm for the role.
How important it is.
Well, exactly, but I think yeah, I think ultimately, you know, you can train. I think this is it. You can train skills, but you can't train attitude. So so I think that's the ultimate kind of point to come across. And I think you can, generally speaking, it's very difficult to pick that up with a CV and a cover letter. But that's, yeah, it's really key that enthusiasm and that drive to develop within the industry is highlighted as a key point.
Lovely. Ailey?
Goodness, you have stole the two good ones. I would say the positive attitude. So to go with the enthusiasm, a positive attitude about the role. We're looking at CVs. We're looking for that really to come across in the personal statement or the cover letter, and just personalising the CV to the role. So within your sort of initial statement, refer to the company or refer to the project or refer to the role, and then that really shows that you're really invested within that organisation and within that role. And even if it's a case, it doesn't always need to be about what you have done. It can be about what excites you about the opportunity. So if you think that a particular role will give you the opportunity to increase your knowledge on, I don't know, wind turbine technology, or you think that the role will give you the opportunity to increase your problem solving skills or something like that, it doesn't necessarily need to be what you've done. It can be what you hope to achieve by taking on that role.
Okay, lovely. And we've got another question. How important is English and maths? So I think that's a really good question, especially when we've got school leavers. How important is English and maths in terms of securing employment and to the sector?
For apprenticeships, for a start, you really need to have passed your maths and English. So it's one of the prerequisites, really. Don't have to have the highest grade, but you have to have passed it.
Lovely. We've just had another question come in as well, which is great. If I've got a relevant level 2 in a suitable subject stroke discipline, would I be able to go straight on to the level 3 apprenticeship and not repeat level 2? So I can answer that one. So the level 3 apprenticeship for the wind technician, there isn't a level 2 equivalent. So you would go straight in at level 3, but that feeds nicely into what we've just said about English and maths and making sure you've got those starting points. So make sure you've got your English and maths. Make sure that you've either got relevant or suitable GCSEs, or engineering qualification is a possibility but not mandatory. You could come straight out of school or A-levels, but it's about, as Ailey and Susan have both said, it's about getting that application right to make you shine for whoever's reading that application. Okay, so we've got one last question. Do we think there will always be jobs in the wind sector, or do you think that once I've got the skills in the wind sector, I might work elsewhere in clean energy?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah. Will we all take a go at it?
Go for it. You can go first, Susan.
you know, you go into this sector, there are jobs in the UK and around the world. It is where it's going to be. And, you know, if you start in wind, that's a great place to start, but there'll be roles already. People that I work with that came in for wind are now doing things in hydrogen and other areas. It's a great place to start.
I think we'd all agree with that one. It's got a lot of opportunity for the future, hasn't it?
Yeah, really.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've worked all the way through the questions. East Coast College would like to thank everybody for attending, and also for the time and support Susan, Gemma and Ailey have given today. It's been really great. This webinar is being recorded so we can share it on the YouTube for East Coast College, and we'll make sure it's accessible on LinkedIn, etc. So please spread the word about the great opportunities in the sector moving forwards. What you'll see is a slide on the screen now that just highlights the East Coast College website and also the apprenticeship team email. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and we'll do the best to support you on your future careers.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
Thank you for
inviting
your
us.
time, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.